Sarah had always been the quiet one at family dinners, the one they laughed at, the one they ignored. No one ever asked what she really did. But when a stranger walked up, called her ma'am, and revealed who she truly was, the entire table froze in shock before diving into the story. Comment where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. They laughed at me at dinner again. Sarah's just the quiet one. My cousin Lisa smirked, swirling the wine in her glass like she was someone important. Not everyone's cut out to be a go-getter. Everyone chuckled, as if they were all in on some private joke about me. My uncle leaned over and clapped my dad on the back, his voice booming. At least your son's doing great at the firm. You should be proud. I bit my tongue, my nails digging into my palm under the table. It was always like this. Every family dinner felt like a performance I hadn't auditioned for. They never asked me about my life, my work, or even how I was feeling. I wasn't the shining lawyer cousin, or the loud tech bro nephew. I was just Sarah, the quiet one, the one who helped clear the dishes, the one who was always figuring things out. They spoke over me, around me, never to me. And if by some miracle I did say something, the table would fall into that uncomfortable silence. Not because I said anything wrong, but because they didn't know how to process the idea that I had. Thoughts, opinions, a voice. They looked at me like I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. I used to try. In the early years, I'd show up eager, ready to share my wins, training milestones, personal growth, things that mattered to me. But the blank stares or forced, "Oh, that's nice," reactions wore me down, so I stopped. I stopped offering details, stopped volunteering updates, stopped trying to prove I belonged at a table that refused to see me. I became what they expected. Quiet, distant, polite. It was easier that way. Until tonight. Tonight was different. Tonight was my father's retirement dinner. A big deal. His company had rented out a banquet hall, decorated it with blue and gold streamers, set the tables with fancy linens and silver cutlery. Everyone showed up dressed to impress. It wasn't just family, it was coworkers, managers, friends. His whole corporate team was there, including some top executives. My father was nervous. He'd been practicing his speech for weeks. "Don't do anything weird tonight," he told me as we walked in. "Just smile and stay out of the way." Like I was a walking embarrassment. Like I hadn't spent the past several years doing something that mattered more than anything he'd ever asked about. We were seated at a long table near the back of the hall, tucked between the buffet line and a fake potted plant. My cousin Lisa and her boyfriend had somehow gotten seated near the front, chatting up one of the regional managers. The dinner started, courses served one by one, salad, soup, then the main. My family wasted no time falling back into their usual routine, passing jokes around like bread rolls, all at my expense. "Still single, Sarah? Ever think about coming to work with your dad? Maybe they'll give you a desk in the corner." "What do you do again?" Lisa asked with a smirk. "Something with kids, right?" Before I could speak, my dad waved dismissively. "She's doing some community thing, helping out around town. She's still figuring things out." I forced a smile and focused on cutting my food. In truth, I was a commissioned officer in the Air Force, a pilot. I had been deployed twice. I had led emergency operations during a NATO training exercise. I'd earned commendations. I had people under my command. I had just received a promotion, but they didn't know any of that. Not even my dad. Then, something shifted. A man in a sleek gray suit approached our table. He looked familiar, tall, clean-cut, clearly one of the corporate higher-ups. Everyone at our table stiffened. Eyes followed him as he walked straight to us. "Excuse me," he said, scanning the group. "Is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Anderson here?" Silence. Forks stopped. Glasses hovered mid-air. I looked up and stood. "Yes, sir." "That's me." His face lit up. "Pleasure to meet you, ma'am. I served with your CO back in the day. He spoke very highly of you. Told me you held an entire operation together under pressure. Impressive stuff." The entire table was staring at me. "I just wanted to personally thank you for your service," he continued. "And for representing the country with such excellence." He extended his hand. I shook it firmly. "Thank you, sir. I said, calm and collected. He gave a respectful nod. We could use more leaders like you. And just like that, he turned and walked away. I sat down slowly. Every eye was still on me. You're in the military? My cousin Lisa asked, blinking. I'm in the Air Force, I said. Pilot, 6 years in, just got promoted last month. My dad looked like he had swallowed a lemon. Why didn't you tell us? I did, I said simply. You just didn't listen. And that was the truth. I hadn't been hiding. I just stopped shouting into a void that never cared to hear me. There was a long, heavy silence. Then Uncle Jim raised his glass. To Sarah, he said, voice quieter than usual but sincere. Looks like we've got a real hero in the family. Glasses clinked, though some hands were slow to move, but I didn't need their applause. I didn't need their praise. I had already learned to stand tall on my own. That night, something shifted, not just in how they saw me, but in how I saw myself. For so long I had shrunk to fit inside the box they built for me. But now I was done playing small. They once called nothing. But someone who knew who I was had looked me in the eye and called me ma'am. And in that moment, I finally believed it too, though it was my father's retirement dinner. A big deal not just for him, but for the entire family. The company had gone all out, renting one of the nicest banquet halls in the city. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, casting warm light on the white tablecloths and glittering glassware. Waiters in crisp black tuxedos moved smoothly between tables, carrying trays of appetizers that looked like they belonged in a food magazine. It was the kind of event you dressed up for, rehearsed small talk for, practiced your smile for. My dad had spent the last 3 decades at that company. He climbed the ladder slowly, carefully. He was never flashy, but he was consistent, dependable. He lived and breathed work. He was proud of it, and tonight he was being honored for it.
They
invited everyone. Friends, co-workers, extended family. Even a few of the company's top executives were in attendance. Regional managers, board members, and some corporate VPs, the kind of people who normally don't show up unless it's someone they really respect. Dad was nervous. He'd rehearsed his speech at least a dozen times at home, practicing in front of the mirror, then again in the car on the way there. He wanted everything to go perfectly. Just don't embarrass me, he said to me before we left, straightening his tie in. The reflection of the car window. His tone was light, almost joking, but I knew better. I was used to that line. It wasn't new. It had followed me through childhood birthdays, school plays, and even my high school graduation. Just don't embarrass me. As if I was a walking liability. As if my mere presence might somehow ruin his big moment. When we arrived, the hostess led us to our assigned table. Of course, our seats were tucked near the edge of the room, far from the main stage, practically next to the kitchen doors. Meanwhile, my cousin Lisa, always the family star, had landed a prime spot up front, sitting beside one of the vice presidents. Her boyfriend, a law school student with too much cologne and too little humility, chatted confidently with anyone who would listen. I sat quietly, folded into the corner of the table, watching the evening unfold around me. The first course arrived, followed by small talk and the clinking of glasses. The wine started flowing. And, like clockwork, so did the usual jokes. Still not married, Sarah? One relative asked, almost as if it were a punchline. Ever think about working at the company? Follow in your dad's footsteps? Another chimed in, clearly not expecting an answer. Then Lisa turned to me with a smirk. What do you do these days anyway? Still helping out at that community center or whatever? I opened my mouth to speak, but Dad was quicker. She's just figuring things out, he said, waving a hand like he was brushing away an invisible fly. She helps out around town. Volunteers or something. Right, Sarah. All eyes turned to me for confirmation. I smiled politely. That tight, neutral smile I'd practiced for moments exactly like this. The kind you wear to stop yourself from saying what you really want to say. I nodded slightly, playing along. Inside, though, my jaw had clenched. My nails pressed into my palm beneath the tablecloth. I was a commissioned officer in the United
States Air Force, a trained pilot.
I had just returned from a months-long NATO mission overseas, one that involved tight deadlines, high pressure, and situations where lives were on the line. I had successfully led a unit through a high-risk operation involving multiple nations, and I'd been recognized for my leadership and decision-making under pressure. I had stood in briefing rooms filled with colonels and generals, delivered mission reports to senior commanders, and flown through weather that would have made most people's stomachs turn. But no one at this table knew that. Not even my father, the man who raised me, the man whose name I shared. He didn't know, not because I never told him, but because he never listened. I'd given up trying to explain a long time ago. Every time I tried to share something, training updates, commendations, career milestones, he'd nod distractedly and change the subject. Eventually, I stopped telling him anything at all. And now here he was, publicly reducing me to a girl who helps out in the community or something. Like I spent my days folding pamphlets at a charity booth. I glanced around the table. They were all so smug, so certain in their assumptions about who I was or who I wasn't. It didn't matter that none of them had really asked about my life. It didn't matter that I had worked harder, endured more, and seen things they couldn't even imagine. They had written my story for me already. In their eyes, I was the quiet one, the soft one, the one who never quite figured it out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand on the table and list every rank, every deployment, every moment I had risked. Something bigger than myself, but I didn't. I sat there, steady and calm, and let them go on believing whatever they needed to believe, because I knew what was coming next. And they weren't ready for it. ChatGPT said, midway through dinner. Right as the servers began clearing plates and refilling wine glasses, a tall man in a sharp gray suit approached our table. He walked with purpose, eyes scanning the room like someone who was used to being in charge. I recognized him immediately. He was one of the speakers from earlier in the evening. The regional vice president, if I remembered correctly. He had given a brief but impressive speech about leadership, legacy, and the value of service. He was the kind of man people noticed when he entered a room. As he made his way directly toward our table, I saw the posture of everyone around me shift. My cousin Lisa straightened in her chair, casually brushing her hair behind her ear. My uncle stopped mid-sentence, and my dad adjusted his tie for the third time that evening. The air around us seemed to hold its breath. When the man reached our table, he paused, scanning each face with intention. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth but commanding. "Is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Anderson here?" For a moment, everything stopped. The clinking of silverware, the hum of distant conversation, everything seemed to go silent. I could feel every eye at the table swing toward me in unison, their expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief. Lisa's smirk vanished. My dad's mouth opened slightly, like he was about to say something but forgot how to speak. I stood slowly, keeping my posture straight and composed. "Yes, sir," I said, my voice steady. "That's me." A smile spread across the man's face. He extended a hand without hesitation. "Pleasure to finally meet you, ma'am. I've heard excellent things." "Ma'am?" My cousin Lisa whispered, almost to herself, as though trying to figure out if she'd misheard. My dad was still frozen, eyes wide, like he had just watched his own daughter become someone completely unrecognizable. The man continued, glancing around the table briefly before locking eyes with me again. "I served with your commanding officer years ago." "Good man. We've stayed in touch ever since. He couldn't stop singing your praises. Said you were the calm in the storm during a critical communications failure overseas. That your decision-making under pressure likely prevented an international incident." His words hung in the air like thunder. "I just wanted to thank you," he said, more softly now but with complete sincerity, "for your service, and for representing the country with such class and leadership." No one moved. My dad blinked but said nothing. My uncle's jaw was practically in his lap. Even Lisa looked like someone had poured ice water down her back. I reached out and shook the man's hand. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot to hear," he nodded, clearly impressed. "If you're ever interested, I'd love to have a conversation. About leadership development?" People like you, people who lead with integrity and quiet strength, we need more of that in the private sector. You've got leadership written all over you. I offered a modest smile. I appreciate that, sir. I'll keep it in mind. He gave me a final nod of respect, then turned and walked away, leaving behind a stunned silence that weighed heavy on the table. I sat back down slowly, adjusting my napkin in my lap as if nothing had happened, though my heart beat steadily in my chest. For the first time in what felt like forever, every single pair of eyes at the table was on me, but not in judgment or mockery. In awe and confusion. In recalibration, because for once they were seeing me. Not the quiet girl, not the one figuring things out, not the disappointment or the mystery, but the woman I truly was. Still, no one said a word. It was my cousin who finally broke the silence, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Wait, you're actually in the military, like, the real thing? I turned to her, calm and steady. Yes, I'm in the Air Force. I've been serving for the past 6 years. I'm a commissioned officer, just completed a joint NATO mission, got promoted recently. My uncle cleared his throat. You never mentioned any of this. I looked at him, then glanced toward my father. I've mentioned it, I said. More than once. You just didn't listen. That landed like a stone in water. My father looked down at his plate. Maybe. It was shame, maybe it was confusion. Or maybe for the first time, he was starting to realize how little he actually knew about the daughter who had sat across from him all these years. I didn't say anything more. I didn't need to. The silence around the table now wasn't awkward, it was heavy with realization. You could almost hear the gears turning in their minds, trying to piece together a version of me that they'd never taken the time to understand. Uncle Jim eventually lifted his glass. Well then, he said slowly, thoughtfully, to Sarah. Few others followed, raising their glasses without a word. The clinking was softer this time, more uncertain. Less performative, but me? I didn't need their approval. For years I had walked into rooms like this and felt small, invisible, underestimated. I had allowed their perceptions of me to shrink who I really was. I'd told myself it was easier not to correct them, not to explain, not to challenge the version of me they'd created in their heads. But tonight, with one man's handshake and a few simple words, that version of me shattered. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was undeniable. Nobody spoke for a full minute. It was the kind of silence that pressed down on the room, thick and pulsing with unspoken thoughts. Forks hovered mid-air. Wine glasses paused inches from lips. The only movement was the flicker of candlelight on the table, dancing against the stunned expressions around me. It was my cousin Lisa who finally broke the spell. She leaned forward slightly, her voice small and uncertain, stripped of the smugness it usually carried. You single quotes read in the Air Force? I looked at her and gave a single, calm nod. Yes, I've been flying missions for the last 6 years. I was promoted a few months ago. The words didn't come out with pride or defiance. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to make a scene. The truth was more powerful than any performance. And the truth had finally been dropped. On the table like a stone, rippling through years of assumptions, misunderstandings, and silence. My father looked like he'd been slapped. His eyes searched my face, as if trying to find some part of the daughter he thought he knew inside the woman now sitting across from him. You never said anything,
he blurted. I turned to him, my voice even, unshaken. Actually, I said, I did.
More than once. You just never listened. That landed harder than anything else I could have said. He flinched slightly, not physically but emotionally. His gaze dropped to the tablecloth and he said nothing more. There was no defense, no follow-up, no attempt to explain it away. Because, deep down, he knew I was right. All these years I had tried to share. I had called home during training, emailed updates from deployment, even mentioned my work during family holidays. But it had always been met with distracted nods, quick changes of topic, or outright dismissal.
He didn't ask follow-up questions. He didn't dig deeper.
He didn't care, or at least he didn't know how to show it. I wasn't the version of a daughter he'd imagined, the soft-spoken girl who married young and settled down nearby. I had flown too far from that image literally. And figuratively. Now the table that had once seen me as invisible was forced to see me clearly. And the energy shifted. It wasn't just shock anymore. It was realization, reflection, recalibration, suddenly. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. I wasn't the family afterthought or the one they tiptoed around, unsure of what I actually did. I was the one with a story, a real one. A story built on service, resilience, discipline, leadership, things none of them had bothered to ask about because they'd already decided. I had nothing worth knowing, and it wasn't just a story. It was respect. You could feel it hanging in the air, slowly building as the weight of their assumptions crumbled. They were reevaluating every past interaction, every offhand comment, every dinner where I had been brushed aside. Then, surprisingly, it was Uncle Jim who raised his glass first. His face had softened. There was no sarcasm in his voice, just something that sounded strangely like admiration. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, nodding toward me. To Sarah. One by one, the others followed suit. Some lifted their glasses out of genuine respect. Some out of guilt. Some maybe just because they didn't know what else to do. The clinking of glasses was quieter than usual, less celebratory, more thoughtful, more real. But me? I didn't need their toast. I had already won the moment I stood and said, "Yes, sir, that's me." I had already won the moment their eyes finally widened, not from something outrageous, I said, but from the simple truth that I had become someone they never took the time to see. I didn't need them to cheer for me. I didn't need their applause. I didn't need their validation, because I had stopped waiting for it a long time ago. For years, I had sat at that table, playing the part they had assigned to me, the quiet girl, the late bloomer, the one who never quite figured things out. And for years I had swallowed the words I wanted to say, choosing peace over pride, silence over conflict. But that silence had cost me something, the truth of who I really was, and now they knew. Or at least they were starting to. After the toast, conversation resumed, but it was different. The tone had shifted. No more jokes at my expense. No more patronizing questions. If anything, they looked a little uneasy, like they didn't know how to talk to me now. Like they were wondering what else I had done. What else they had missed. Lisa kept glancing my way, as if trying to reprocess everything. She thought she knew about me. My dad still looked stunned. I didn't mind. Let them sit with it. The rest of the night moved on, but I stayed steady, composed. I didn't need to say anything else. I had said enough, and in that silence that followed, something powerful settled. In my chest, peace. Not the kind that comes from avoiding conflict, but the kind that comes from finally being seen. From knowing you don't have to prove your worth anymore, because you never needed to in the first place. When the dinner ended, and people began to rise and gather their things, a few relatives approached me. Their compliments were clumsy, half-formed. "Didn't know you were doing all that," someone mumbled. "That's really impressive," said another, not quite meeting my eyes. I smiled. I thanked them, but I didn't need it because I knew who I was. And finally so did they. That night changed everything, not in the way you'd expect. Not with fireworks or shouting or dramatic confrontations. No tears were shed, no speeches were made at the table. And yet, something shifted so completely, so irreversibly, that I walked out of that banquet hall no longer carrying the weight I'd brought in. It didn't happen because I made a grand statement or confronted everyone for years of dismissal. It didn't come from raising my voice or defending myself against every sideways glance or condescending comment. In fact, the change happened precisely because I didn't do any of that. What changed everything was that someone outside of my family, someone they respected, someone with authority saw me. Truly saw me. And not only did he see me, he recognized me, acknowledged me, and addressed me with a single word that shattered everything they thought they knew. "Ma'am." That one word echoed louder than all the years of silence combined. It rang in their ears long after the man in the suit had walked away, after he'd shaken my hand and moved on to the next table. It hung in the air like the chime of a distant bell that keeps reverberating in your mind, even when the sound itself has faded. For years I had been just Sarah. The quiet one, the one who helps out somewhere. The one with no clear path, no flashy title, no exciting updates to share. At every family dinner, I was the blank space. They filled it in for me making assumptions, writing a version of my life that fit their narrow view. It didn't matter that it was wrong. It didn't matter that I had achievements worth celebrating. What mattered to them was that I didn't fit the mold they expected me to. But that night, in front of all of them, I wasn't just Sarah anymore. I was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Anderson, a pilot, an officer, a leader. And someone they respected, a man they couldn't dismiss. A man whose words held weight in their world called me ma'am, with confidence, with intention, with respect. It was in that moment that I realized something. I had never needed to prove anything to them. I had never needed to explain myself or fight for a seat at their table of approval. The problem had never been me. It was their vision, their perspective, their limitations. And I had let those limitations shrink me for far too long. Now everything is different. At family dinners, they ask questions. Real questions. They want to know where I've been stationed, what my next assignment is, what it's like to fly at night. They ask about my medals, my rank. They speak my title now. Not always perfectly, not always comfortably, but they try. They listen. Even Lisa, who once laughed about me being the quiet one, now tags me in articles about women in the military. She sends me links with messages like, "Thought of you," or "This reminded me of what you do." I don't think she fully understands my job. But now at least she's curious. She's trying. As for my father, well, he's proud now. I see it in his posture when people ask about his kids. I see it in the way he introduces me at events, standing a little taller, voice a little louder, pausing just slightly before he says my title. It's taken time, but he says it now. My daughter's an officer in the Air Force. He still hasn't apologized. Not for the years of brushing me aside, not for the dismissive jokes, not for the way he spoke over me at that dinner when I could have finally said something for myself. But I don't need the apology anymore. I've stopped waiting for that moment of recognition, that perfect sentence that makes up for years of being overlooked, because I've moved beyond needing their permission to be proud of myself. There was a time I would have done anything for their approval. I would have bent myself in 1,000 directions, worn the version of myself they wanted to see. I stayed quiet so I wouldn't disrupt the narrative they had written for me. I smiled through the smallness they placed me in. But that time is over. Now I walk into those rooms not looking to be seen, but knowing that I already am. And to anyone out there who's been underestimated, ignored, or boxed in by other people's limited imaginations of who you are, you don't owe them anything. Not an explanation, not a defense, not even your story, unless you choose to share it. Don't shrink yourself to fit their small view. Don't edit your success down to something they can easily digest. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them adjust. Let them catch up. Keep doing your work. Keep living your truth, whether it's loud or quiet, visible or invisible to them. You don't have to shout to be powerful. You don't have to argue to be right. Sometimes the world will show up on your behalf in the most unexpected ways, because here's the truth. One moment, one word from someone who sees you, really sees you, can echo louder than years of being talked over. And when that person calls you ma'am or sir, when they acknowledge your strength, your leadership, your worth in front of the very people who once doubted you, you won't need to say a thing. The room will listen. And more importantly, you won't need their validation anymore, because you'll already know who you are. Did this story hit home? Drop a salute in the comments if you've ever been underestimated. Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories.